Welcome to In the News for February 11th, 2022. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
This is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Hey, Brett.
Happy update day again, Jeff.
Once again.
I feel like, is this maybe the third week in a row? Maybe not. Maybe just the second week in a row. But you had a good link today to yet another critical iOS update today. And I always hate to use something like a word like that because I don't want people to go out and panic and everything. But it's critical in the sense that yet again, this is a fairly minor update, but a very important one that I don't think you or I would hesitate to tell folks. You should make sure that your iPad, your iPhone, and your Apple Watch is updated to 15.3.1.
Exactly. We are all looking forward to 15.4 because it's going to have a lot of new features.
Yes. Bring it on.
Whenever an update comes out and you hear the word 0 day used, 0 day is the fancy security way of saying you're not going to be waiting 1 day or you're not going to be waiting 2 days before somebody exploits this. It is being exploited now. And again, whether it's being used in a test site or whether hackers are being used it. In fact, even if it is just being used on somebody testing it, you got to assume that a hacker is using it. So there's something out there. I mean, hopefully the chance of you encountering it is really small, but why not protect yourself by installing this update so that you don't go to a malicious website that can, somehow take over your phone or something bad like that.
And that's one of the reasons that it is important. This is a flaw potentially in the WebKit.
Which is
security, which is basically not just Safari, right? But it's basically
any web browser.
Any web browser on an iPhone and an iPad. And I know that's what a lot of us are doing all the time. Just real quick, I updated my phone and my iPad this morning. This was just released yesterday, I believe, right?
Correct.
So it's very, very new if you haven't seen it yet. But it's fairly quick in just doing the update, having it download. I just always have a quick reminder. The iPhone or the iPad will scream at you if you're less than 50% on your battery, right? So you might want to make sure you're plugged in or just take it. It's just a few minutes for this update, and it's just good to make sure that you are good to go. And also Apple Watch. Don't forget about your Apple Watch as well. Well, we can't get away from updates, and we also apparently can't get away from AirTags. You had a very good paragraph at the very beginning of your post this morning, Mr. Jeff, that Apple, and this was, again, just yesterday, very recent, that Apple was making some announcements. Apple has been watching all of these stories that you and I have been covering as well about good stories about AirTags helping to find people, and you even mentioned one where it was I think a housekeeper's iPad was able to track down an armed suspect, and there's a lot of bad stories that have come out about AirTags where stalkers are using them to track folks down. Anyway, there's good and bad on both sides, just like any kind of a new technology. But I was very happy to see that Apple is paying attention to these things. And now today, or yesterday actually, they just announced a few changes that are just well worth knowing about.
Yeah, and Apple did this not in a vacuum. They talked to some victims' rights organizations. They talked to law enforcement.
Yeah.
A lot of the reasons this has been in the news is there's been, some isolated cases of stalkers using an AirTag to follow somebody, but the news of that has spread, and so different police departments around the country, probably around the world, have been warning people, and I suspect that the warnings have actually gotten more attention than the actual misuse, but that doesn't, mean to it's certainly not good, even if it's a couple times that it's misused. So Apple's done a number of things. I mean, just to hit the highlights, one of the things is when you first set up your AirTag, during the setup process, Apple will remind you that AirTags are not made for tracking people; they're made for tracking your belongings. But then they will also warn
not for kids, or dogs.
That they will warn you that every AirTag has a unique serial number. And so if, and this has actually happened in real life, police have found an AirTag that was improperly used to track somebody, and the police have contacted Apple, and Apple has said, I can tell you exactly who owns that AirTag, and then the police have arrested the person. And so they will now warn you. So again, crooks are stupid, which is why they often get caught, but hopefully anyone that's thinking about doing something nefarious will think back to, oh yeah, before I put this on my ex-girlfriend, I remember that I was told when I first got my AirTag that Apple will tell the police, who I am if I do that. So hopefully that will have some impact. And then there's some other things too, because Apple's going to change the alerts, which is something that they've tweaked over time anyway. The alerts for the AirTags. Already, if some of the alerts that you will sometimes get saying something will be a little bit more vague currently about what is out there. Apple is tweaking it to be more precise so that if it's AirPods, because you can also use AirPods to track somebody, because you can find those and Find My.
Right.
And Apple will be more descriptive in terms of what you should look for when you get that alert. And then Apple is also changing the sounds of it, because right now an AirTag will beep if it's traveling with somebody that's not the owner, and the idea is that the person would hear the beep and would say, I wonder what that is, and they would explore. But then sometimes, there was one case of somebody opening up the AirTag and disabling the sound chip so that it wouldn't make any noise. And you had other cases, I don't know if it actually happened or people were just concerned about it, that somebody might take an AirTag and wrap it in something that sort of muffles the sound to try to make it more secret. And so what Apple has said is not only will the AirTag beep, and they've even adjusted the beep to try to be more prominent, but also if somebody has an iPhone, now I don't know if it would work if you have an Android nearby, but if you have an iPhone nearby, your own iPhone will beep as well. So even if the AirTag sound was disabled or muffled, the victim's iPhone would say, beep beep, there's an AirTag near you. So it's all these sorts of things, and there's some other tweaks that they've done. But the idea is that Apple is continuing. When the AirTags first came out, Apple included a lot of features for this very risk. And then over time, as people have become more creative in coming up with either actual misuses or ideas of misuses, Apple is tweaking it through the software. So this may not be the last tweak that they make, but the hope is that people would just use AirTags for good, to find lost items, which I've used in the past, and they worked great, and really deter the improper use. That's what we want. That's what we all hope for.
The one thing that really caught my eye here is working with law enforcement. They in Apple's statement, they say every AirTag has a unique serial number, just like you said. Paired AirTags are associated with an Apple ID. Apple can provide that paired account details in response to a subpoena or valid request from law enforcement. And I guess the reason that as soon as I read that, it just didn't fit in my brain, because so often we hear about Apple, I don't want to say not cooperating, but not being able to provide that kind of information to law enforcement, right? Like law enforcement comes to them and say, can you unlock this phone? Can you give us the iCloud details or something, for this individual? And many times Apple has gone on record many times saying, we don't have access to that, right? They focus on the privacy. I think this is an absolutely appropriate instance where they should provide some of this information. Right. But I just found it interesting that it's not a flip. I mean, I just think it's a reasonable approach to what they should be doing, but it just kind of caught me off guard, because I'm like, wait a minute, working with law enforcement? They absolutely should in this instance. And I think in one of your comments in the post that you had was beware, right? Crooks and others, beware, because they can track this AirTag directly to you, and Apple will provide your details to law enforcement if necessary.
Yeah. One other thing that's interesting about this is there's a bigger story here. The headline is AirTag, and you may think, well, I don't even own an AirTag or something like that. But there's more to it than that. First of all, we're not just talking about AirTag. Yeah. We're talking about the entire Find My network, which is used for, like, for example, the one that you mentioned about the housekeeper. It was actually, former Mayor Bloomberg's housekeeper. Yes. It was a real bad guy that was trying to kidnap his daughter. It's a horrible story. Right. But apparently she had an iPad with her, which is also part of the Find My network. And I guess the bad guys that kidnapped her didn't realize that she had it with her, or maybe it was in her purse or something, and use that to find her. So Find My is not just AirTags, it's also AirPods, iPhones, computers, everything. So there's a bigger issue here, and it's not even just Apple products, because people have talked about the Internet of Things as devices have become smarter. You need to think about speakers in your home, like the Amazon products or the Apple products, can hear what's going on, and are there privacy concerns? Devices that can travel with you know where you are, not just Apple devices, but other devices too. GPS has been around for a long. And as we get into this, more sophisticated technology that's a part of our everyday lives, there's going to be all these implications, and they can be used for good. If you fall down and your Apple Watch automatically calls the police and they come protect you so that, you don't pass out and die. Good things of being able to track where you are. And then there's bad things of people using it. And so it's not like this is just an all black or an all white and all good and all bad. There are decisions that need to be made to just find that appropriate middle ground so that it's doing the right thing while also respecting people's privacy. And they're not easy decisions, and reasonable minds can disagree over what's the right thing to do. It's just a question of making those decisions. But these are decisions that we didn't need to worry about 20 years ago when, at least from a technology standpoint, things are a little bit more simple. So it's not just Apple products. It's not just the AirTag. It's going to be more and more of a part of who we are every day going forward.
Absolutely. I like this headline from Michael Kahn at PC World, the story you linked to. If you abuse AirTags for stalking, expect police to come knocking. All I could think about was, I know a Stevie Ray Vaughan blues song, If the House is a Rocking, don't come knocking. If the AirTag starts beeping, the police are going to come knocking. I love it. I'm so glad you did that. Let's say a special happy birthday anniversary to our friend who I've never even met, but we all know him, Texas lawyer Rod Ponton, otherwise known as Lawyercat. I don't know how much this went viral. Well, actually, I do a little bit. I know this went way outside of like the typical legal circles that you and I run in. If anybody needs a little bit of a reminder about this, there was a virtual hearing. I forget. It was about a year ago, right?
There was exactly
a virtual
year ago
hearing.
This week, yeah.
And the judge was on Zoom, as well as the attorneys from both sides. And one of the lawyers, apparently, I remember we talked about this in some of the details, had a filter on that he was a cat instead of a lawyer. And I love this little trick. You linked to the video because I think the judge himself released this video update, which you said you had never seen the end of it, because there is a happy ending here. Apparently, the judge explains to the lawyer exactly how to turn filters off in Zoom, and voila, we see Mr. Ponton there. I also like this. The other side attorney, you can see he calls in somebody to laugh at the screen there. I'm so glad you linked to that. It's great.
Very funny. And the judge who released the full video, Judge Roy Ferguson, I'm not familiar with him because I don't practice in Texas.
Right.
He has a Twitter feed on which he's very active, and it's very obvious that this is a tech-savvy judge. So it was helpful because he was able to help the attorney a year ago when it happened. But he has a sense of humor of it. And I've seen this attorney interviewed in the past when this happened a year ago, and he was a very good sport about it and said that, hopefully this will allow people to learn, which is the reason that, now that we're a year later and we have all become so much more sophisticated with Zoom,
proficient,
whether you're an attorney or not, we're using Zoom. In my family, we've used Zoom for Easter during the pandemic, just so I could see some of my cousins and grandparents and stuff, stuff like that. People are very much more familiar with the technology. We're using it with our kids' schools. I was literally just earlier this morning on a Zoom for my daughter's school. So, but we still make mistakes of forgetting to mute and having a camera on when you think it's off, and maybe cat filters, and so all of us are susceptible to making these mistakes, and so it's nice when you are reminded that this can happen to anyone. Hopefully, you do a better job of being careful about it.
So great, I love it. Okay, so from Lawyercats to Tap to Pay, I saw this story blow up just everywhere, and I'm glad that you had a couple of links to this because I really think this is going to be something, I think, more important than I think a lot of people realize. In fact, I remember Tim Cook, Apple released some results, a week or two or so ago. We didn't cover them all that in much detail, but I remember one of the stories I read about, Tim Cook was actually talking a little bit more about Apple Pay and Apple Wallet and the Apple credit card. And it just seems like this could be a little bit of a sleeper technology a little bit. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but I'm glad you linked to this. It was an announcement that a few days ago Apple made that we could use our iPhones to pay. Now, we can already send Apple Pay. We can already send money back and forth, and even Venmo and some of the other services as well. But many times, if you go to a farmer's market, for example, or so, the farmer will have a phone, an iPhone, and they'll have a little dongle that they plug into their phone for, is it Square, right? So that they could swipe your credit card. But now you don't even have to have the little dongle. At least that's the way that I understand it, Jeff. This is great stuff.
Yeah, and you'll still use a third-party service like Square or Stripe or one of those.
Yeah, exactly.
And Stripe was the partner for the announcement, but Apple's going to open this up to everybody. It's just that way the vendor doesn't have to plug in a dongle, or they don't have to have a little swipe thing
So
attached to it. The iPhone itself, you will be able to tap a credit card on it, because just most credit cards nowadays have NFC in it.
Right.
And you can
Little
tap to
chip,
pay,
yeah.
which is something that's been around in Europe and Canada for a very long time, but it's coming to
Right.
America now too over the last couple of years. Or, of course, if the other person has an iPhone, they can tap to pay. But it's just going to make things easier and more seamless. And I like that we're moving more and more towards this world where you just pay for things seamlessly. I mean, when I was coming into work this morning, I got a coffee, and when I
Yeah.
went to the little coffee place in my building, I just tapped with my Apple Watch, and it was quick and easy, and I didn't have to worry about pulling out change, or even just the concern about swiping. The more that we move towards contactless payment, I just think it's easier, it's more seamless, it's probably safer actually to some degree too.
Yeah.
Don't have to worry about cash as much. So I'm glad that Apple is doing this. I'm sure that merchants will take advantage of it. And so good for Apple. And of course, Apple's doing it a little selfishly, because they want to be a part of this future.
Of course.
Part of the payment, because they get a tiny bit of money. First of all, they make a tiny bit of money when people use the service. But also,
Correct.
I think Apple just wants to make sure that Apple products, especially the iPhone and Apple Watch, remain relevant in this world. So they don't want somebody else moving us towards the future. They want to be a part of that so that they remain a relevant part of it, which I'm glad that they're doing.
I'm not going to say much more, because this is part of my tip today that I wanted to share, and just being able to use this. But I'm glad that we raised it, and I'm glad you linked to it, because, again, I just feel that this is something that is going to be bigger than I think a lot of people understand. And to be perfectly honest, with no inside information from Apple at all, I think Apple knows it as well, just similar to some of the things that you were saying there.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot more to come on this, I'm sure.
Speaking of Apple and their different products and things that could take over the world, this was fascinating to me, Jeff, that you linked to this. I saw this as well, and I'll show the graphic here in just a moment. Apple leads the headphone market. What? At least in the U.S. Mm-hmm. What? I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, when I think headphones, of course I do think Apple, but I guess I don't think of Apple as a headphone creator. Again, I know that sounds a little silly, because we got AirPods and we talk about that, but they bought Beats. You can fill in some of the blanks there. But I think of like Bose. I think of some of the other companies that have been making headphones for years and years. But this was a fascinating statistic for me, at least, that no, Apple is leading in this market.
Yeah. Now, it wasn't that long ago that Apple in the headphone market just meant, the little white cords hanging out of your ears when you had an iPod. But the the AirPods are incredibly popular. I love mine. And of course, Beats is very popular too, and very noticeable with their design.
Yes.
And I guess if you own those two, that's enough to lead the market. And what I like about it is Apple has, as we've discussed in the past, Apple is really pushing forward with this through spatial audio and other things.
Yeah.
I mean, Apple they're
point.
not just resting on their laurels. They're pushing the technology forward in great ways, noise cancellation, stuff like that. So but it's interesting to see all the success that they've had. I guess a lot of people have been attracted to the good products that they've come out with.
This was the little graphic that everyone linked to. Is it Statista?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Stats. It's a stat company. Well, I've linked to several things from Statista before. They're very good. But apparently they had interviewed over about 4,200 people between January and December 2021. So I guess a whole year. I'm not really sure exactly what they did, but apparently this was sort of an independent type of survey that they did. And sure enough, the AirPods, and I guess all of the AirPod versions, right, from AirPods and 1 and 2 and 3 and the AirPods Pro, led the market 34.4%. And the second U.S. headphone that was the most popular was Beats by Dr. Dre, which Apple, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago or so, or maybe a little bit more, that Apple purchased the Beats brand and brought them on. And just like what you were saying, they're the second most popular. And then third is Bose. And then Samsung, JBL, Sony. I mean, I'm looking at here on this little graphic. Just fascinating. If somebody had asked me before this stat came out, Jeff, I would have said no. I mean, Apple has got to be high up there. But, probably maybe 3 or 4 it would have been my best guess. This just blew me away that Apple is dominating this aspect, and I don't think they're going to slow down either. That's just great.
Also interesting that, I mean, assuming that the survey is right, and of course surveys can be off a little bit.
Sure.
Bose with 12.5%. If I just had to guess, I would have guessed that Bose was higher than 12% of the market. So it's interesting.
Good stuff there. Now, in a similar vein, you linked to another interesting product that I guess I hadn't really thought of too much.
Yeah, neither had I. This is interesting.
Kokoon? Kokoon. Oh, Kokoon. Okay, I get it. Kokoon. Kokoon. I get it. Kokoon Nightbuds. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is if you're having trouble falling asleep, maybe because you share a room with somebody who snores, or maybe just because, or maybe the opposite. Maybe just the complete silence makes it hard for you to go to sleep. I know some people have a noise machine. In fact, we have one that we sometimes use on vacation. In fact, even in my own bedroom, we have a ceiling fan at the top, and just the noise of the ceiling fan actually I sort of find sort of soothing to go to sleep. You can control the entire environment of your room by having some sort of a noise machine. But if you want to do it just for you and not for somebody else that's in the room, these Kokoon devices, it's like an earphones that go in your ear, and it wraps around the back of your head. And it's described on this article by Julian Perry on Gadgeteer that it's made to be soft so that you can go to sleep with it and stuff. And it sounds interesting. They're not cheap. I mean, I want to say this one was 200 and something.
Yeah, you said 224.
224. And although not mentioned in this article, I've heard people mention in the past, and then literally just this week I saw. I think it was actually Neil Patrick Harris, of all things, the old Doogie Howser.
Oh, interesting.
He has a really nice newsletter called Wondercade, which is great. It's free. I recommend that folks subscribe to it.
Oh, nice. Okay.
He's got interesting things in there every week. But he was mentioning the Bose. Speaking of Bose, the Bose Sleep Buds, which looks more like an AirPod. It's just a little bud that fits into your ear, and I think these are made to go to sleep with, so it plays sounds. I think that it may turn off automatically after you go to sleep, and So, and there's always the question of, is it going to fall out of your ear while you're sleeping and get caught in your bed? And I don't know. I haven't tried these products, so I don't know. Maybe the Kokoon is actually better for that standpoint because you're less likely to lose it because it's sort of bigger. But if you're having trouble going to sleep, these products, although not cheap, I think that this makes a lot of good sense. So it's a whole market that I had not thought about, and now that I've seen it, I really understand how people would really enjoy these and get a lot of value out of them.
You linked to this, and it made me think of a couple of stories that you and I have covered where people might say, well, why should I spend another $200? I've already got like AirPods Pro or AirPods. I'll just wear those to bed and sleep with them. And it's not funny, but most of the stories that I've seen do have a happy ending, that people will fall asleep with their AirPods in, and then at some point in the night, depending on how easy or crazy that they sleep, they'll end up swallowing the AirPods. So regardless of which device that you pick for sleeping with, because I think it is a nifty market. It's a nice average, but please just make sure you don't swallow your AirPods. Again, most of the stories have a happy ending, but man, you don't want to have to go to the ER and have to get an X-ray about looking for your.
Which is also why you might want
to
use a device that's specially designed for sleeping with it, so that presumably the manufacturer has thought through those sorts of implications and stuff like that. So.
Another interesting story that you linked to, and this is getting back sort of to the iPhone specifically. I saw this, and it piqued my interest just specifically because what I do sort of in my day job is I'm familiar with a company called Cellebrite. And many people may have heard of Cellebrite in one way or another. Certainly they've come up in headlines over the last several years when it comes to iPhones. But they are a forensic, I call it making a forensic image. They're a forensic tool that mostly law enforcement, but even lawyers and legal professionals can use to take information off of mobile devices. And Cellebrite can work with a variety of different devices. In fact, if you know of any law enforcement folks that use Cellebrite, it usually is almost like a suitcase because the hardware is very small, but the suitcase just contains all of the different plugs and dongles that you could ever need for any kind of a mobile device. And they can use this technology to basically create a forensic copy of all of the information on a mobile device. So we do this to capture emails and text messages and pictures and any kind of potentially nefarious things or just information about who was communicating with who most of the time, even some geographic information. So I thought this was an interesting story because Cellebrite has been in some headlines for good and for bad reasons in some aspects, and they are very successful in what they can do. I think it's an Israeli company is where they are based out of, and while many people use these. In fact, there's been other stories that many of the U.S. government agencies have Cellebrite, and most law enforcement have somebody that can use Cellebrite. That while it can unlock a locked iPhone, they don't do this unless you send it to them. A lot of people always say, well, they're scared because if somebody could get an iPhone, that somebody could get into it. And Apple has thought about this many times. We've talked about this many times. Unless they have physical access along with your passcode, typically, there is no way to get access to a lot of the information on that iPhone. Cellebrite seems to have cracked it, but they won't let you have the technology. You got to send it to them and pay a little bit of money too.
Brett, because it used to be that a law enforcement can use or others, not just law enforcement, could use the Cellebrite hardware if they had a password to an iPhone, like if they arrested somebody and the person told the cops their password, then they could easily get into it and copy all the data off of it and look for pictures that were incriminating and stuff like that.
Yes, exactly.
But even if the person did not provide their passcode, there were different ways that Cellebrite could break in there, and it's changed over time as the iPhone technology has changed. At one point, the police would have to plug it in within a certain period of time, and then other things changed over time. But the latest news is that the Cellebrite that used to be able to crack an iPhone as of right now doesn't do it at all. And the reason for that is because somebody got a copy of a Cellebrite device and sort of reverse engineered what it was doing, and Apple was able to improve the, it's always this cat and mouse game. The people breaking into iPhones, whether they are more legitimate companies or whether they are hackers, they're coming up with new ways to break into the iPhone, and Apple is coming new ways to close those doors. So as of today, Cellebrite cannot break into an iPhone using the device, but if you send an iPhone to Cellebrite and give them $4,000, they will unlock it for you. So it continues to be, and the reason that all of these stories are interesting to me is really just for awareness. That I think folks, certainly if you're an attorney and you've got clients, but anyone, no matter what profession you're in, iPhones are pretty secure, and Apple works really hard at keeping them secure as long as you have a good password on it. But you should know that there are ways that whether your iPhone is being used for good or evil, that some people can break into it, and not all the time, but it's always a risk that's out there. And so it's just something to think about. I mean, heck, we have the Olympics going on right now in China. Yeah. And I hear people talking about how they didn't want to take their personal iPhone to China because they're just concerned that something might happen because they have obviously such a lockdown society over there, that China might break into and install some sort of malware, and so they would bring like a burner phone, something that just has nothing on it, just to have something with them, but without any of their personal information, just to feel safer. And because this changes so rapidly from day to day, there's no rule of it's always going to be safe if you do this, and it's going to always be unsafe if you do that, because that changes all the time. So when you see stories like this, it's interesting to know today what the latest story is on Cellebrite, but it's going to change tomorrow, and it's going to change again the day after that and the day after that. I think it's mostly important just to be aware of this, continuing back and forth over how safe it is and can it be broken into. And again, I tend to think of it, and I tend to think of it from the standpoint of my personal iPhone. I don't want someone breaking into it. But on the other hand, if it's the iPhone of this horrible criminal that did something nefarious, well, then of course I want them to break into it. So those are contrary, and there's no good answer.
Well, apparently, even if you are catching the wrong fish, that they could come after your iPhone. This is the other story I referred to, that this week, U.S. government Cellebrite customers, there's 2,800 departments, including Fish and Wildlife Service.
I would not have guessed. I know. Fish and Wildlife Service is breaking into phones.
They say Fish and Wildlife Service frequently work to thwart a variety of environmental offenses, from illegal deforestation to hunting without a license. So I don't mean to make light of it, but it was just a headline. A lot of people were saying, it's like, wow, there's a lot of people using this Cellebrite software. And just like you said, Jeff, I think you said it very well. It's just having an awareness, no matter what profession you're in or what you're doing, just having an awareness that these tools are out there. You and I have talked about the Pegasus software quite a bit, which doesn't require physical access to the device, unlike Cellebrite, but still something to be aware of as you go through this. Excellent. Okay, let's switch back to In the Know, and I'm going to switch back to the Apple Pay. kind of, well, actually, my general tip is I just want people to understand even how to set this up, because I still get frustrated, Jeff. Even I love my wife, but I'm gonna put her on display here in the sense that, every time we go to the store and we're together, I might pay either with my Apple Watch or my iPhone, and she just stands there and says, "Hey, how did you do that?" And it has been so difficult for me, not just my wife, but anybody that I talk to understand we don't have to have a physical credit card. You mentioned it already today. And I listened to a couple other podcasts that were saying in Europe, in Canada, almost everywhere else in the world, the idea of having a physical card to pay for something is almost ludicrous in these days. It's almost like thinking when I go to a restaurant, I don't want to give my physical credit card to the waiter or the waitress. Not because I necessarily think they're going to do something bad, but I just don't want that to get out of my control. And that's why, again, I was saying earlier, I think this Apple Pay component, this service, is becoming even so much more important. The only thing I wish, one of the things that I wish, is Apple would not make this as confusing, although maybe it's not Apple, maybe it's me. But we have the Apple Wallet, which is more the app on the phone, right? We have Apple Pay, which is the service, as it were. There is Apple Cash, which works inside the wallet with Apple Pay. And then we have the Apple Credit Card. So there's a lot of Apple financial things to keep track of. And sometimes I know it can be confusing. But just quickly, if you haven't looked into Apple Pay, and I'm sure if you have an iPhone, it's at least popped up before and tried to get you to use it. But if you haven't done it, either because you're like my wife or other folks that I work with, that you just don't trust it yet, you're not comfortable giving up that physical credit card. And I don't mean give it up, but in the sense of think about this differently, right? It's so much more secure to use a credit card on the phone. But just open the Apple Wallet app. That's the app. It looks like a little credit cards are in this little wallet app. And you can hit the plus sign there. And if you have your physical credit card with you, there's a couple of different ways you can add that to that Apple Wallet. My favorite is the camera will turn on the iPhone, and you can simply take a picture of the credit card number with the expiration date, and it'll fill all that information in for you. You may still have to put in that security code, although sometimes it'll capture that as well. But it makes it very easy. The next step once you add the credit card is it will ping your credit card holder company. It has to go through and do that. You have to hit agree, and it has to be an agreement. This is still a requirement, but it's very, very quick on that. Like, you don't have to wait for a long time, but you do have to get that to be approved. And then that credit card is now added to your Apple Wallet. So the next time you go to Target or somewhere you're getting ready to pay, instead of fumbling around getting your wallet out, you've probably got easy access to your phone or your Apple Watch, and you can just double click the side button on your iPhone, or I think is it a double click or is the side click or on your Apple Watch, and your credit cards will come up. I like to pick my credit card first before I get close to that little terminal. So I click and open up, and you have to do a Face ID, or it has to do Touch ID, or you have to put in your passcode. But then I have 3 or 4 different credit cards, and I can select the credit card I want to use, and then I put the iPhone on the little terminal or my Apple Watch. So I like to select which credit card I want to use, because sometimes I use different ones for business or personal, that kind of a thing. And then again, you already mentioned, you talked about this, just using your Apple Watch. Like, you can just pull up the same thing with your Apple Watch. It's already going to be unlocked many times because you have your phone with you, and you can just use your Apple Watch, tap it, or put it very close to that little pay terminal instead of getting out your credit card, and it will charge to your credit card. And I love using that within Apple Pay because it kind of tracks all of those transactions inside the Apple Wallet. Really, really cool stuff there on there. So I know that's a very simplified tip on there, but I just continue to run into folks, Jeff, that either they know about it, they've heard about it, but they're just not comfortable doing it yet. I don't know. I like to get the credit card out. And in my mind, that's going the way of the dodo. Like, we're not going to be using physical credit cards in the very near future because the rest of the world is not. The rest of the world has already kind of moved on from this. And for various reasons and factors, I think the U.S. is a little bit behind.
I agree completely. That's a good tip. Good tip.
Good. All right.
The one that I have today is, so last year in episode 31, you recommended an app called Stitch It so that you could take a number of screenshots and then stitch them together so that, for example, if you wanted to show back and forth in the Messages app, you could just have one long
Yes.
screenshot. And I've actually
Yes.
used that a couple times since you recommended it last week. This week, I learned about an app. I learned about it when I was listening to another podcast, the iOS Today podcast, Rosemary Orchard. And
Yes.
she suggested an app that I've been using this week, and it is really good. It's called Picsew, P-I-C,
I'm gonna have to get
and then
this.
S-E-W for so. And here's the
Cute.
reason
I
why I
like what
like
they
this.
did
It's
there.
a little bit more complicated to use than Stitch It, but not much more. And the features that it offers are fantastic. First of
Okay.
all, when
I'm
you
listening.
so you take a couple screenshots. I'm going to take the first part of the Messages and then scroll down
Right.
a little bit, take a second screenshot, take the third one. So when you open the Picsew app, you select those photos, and as you select it, it actually puts a 1, a 2, a 3, so that you're saying this is the order. This is the first one.
yeah.
This is the second one. And then second of all, there's a button called Scroll Shot, and this is one big advantage over Stitch It, is that it automatically stitches them together. So it will completely remove the top of the image, the bottom of the image. It finds
Okay.
a place where they line up perfectly. And so in literally just one click, all the work is done if you want to just stop right there and then go ahead and save it. But then you can do more. And let me just pause and say that although I'm finding it most useful for stitching together images, you don't have to use it that way too. You can also select multiple images, maybe like a picture of a car and a picture of a dog and a picture of something
Okay.
else. And if you just wanted to line them up vertically or horizontally, the app can also be used for that, just to make like a nice collage or something like that.
Okay.
But I'm really finding it most useful
yeah, I like
for
this.
stitching together a long screen, whether it's like a long series of tweets that I took or a long series of messages or something like that. And so then at the next stage, once the app automatically stitches it together, you then have all of these really helpful annotation tools. You have a like a pen if you want to draw something or draw an arrow,
Oh, yeah.
whatever colors
Look
you
at
want.
that.
You have an annotation tool that you can you have a redaction tool rather, where you can either completely black it out, or you can have like, you know how it's like pixelated, like a little black, a little white, you know,
Yeah,
like you
yeah,
can't
yeah,
read
yeah.
it. It's a very easy tool for applying that. Now,
Okay.
another cool feature is
Oh,
called
this is
Remove Scroll Bar. You know, when you take the screenshot, it's going to have at the top of the screen, you know, what time did you take that picture?
Right, right.
How many bars did you have on cellular or for Wi-Fi? But if you want to, and if you turn on the Remove Scroll Bar, it automatically it cleans up. Well, first, actually, I'm talking about two different features. I'm sorry. Remove Scroll Bar is the little black and white line on the side of the screen that shows
Yes,
where you are.
right,
When you
right,
stitch
right.
together a bunch of messages, you'll see multiple scroll bars.
Right,
Because
you don't
on
want
different
those.
screens you had different scroll bars, and that's confusing. So Remove Scroll Bar takes that out. Clean Status Bar is the one I was starting to describe. It will replace the time
okay.
on your clock with 9:41. And do you know why it picks 9:41, Brett?
That's what Apple always has in their screenshots. Or
And
if you
why does
connect it
Apple
to the
use
computer.
941 in all their screenshots?
I forget exactly the reason why. Tell us.
Because when the first iPhone was introduced by Steve Jobs, he
It was-
introduced
yeah,
it at
yeah.
9:41, and so
course.
9:41
Yes.
a.m. Pacific time. So every Apple screenshot always has 9:41. So this will replace whatever time the actual picture was with 9:41. It will make all of your cell bars to
Nice.
full. It will make your Wi-Fi bars to full. It will put your battery life at 100%. Just because that way each of your images is consistent. It will, if you want, it can add an iPhone border around the image. Now, if you've stitched together a very long image, it'll look like a really long iPhone, but that's fine because that way if you're showing it to someone else
yeah.
on like a display board, it just
Right.
reinforces the idea that this was taken on an iPhone. Or it can also use Apple Watch, borders too. So it's as
Right,
if it was
right,
taken
right.
on an Apple Watch.
Oh,
You can
nice.
add a watermark if you want to put a watermark. You have
Right.
lots of different export features of different types, exported
Yeah.
as PDF
I just
or
saw
as
that.
a
You can
JPEG
export-
or whatever.
Yeah.
And all of the things that I just described, or most of them, you can set it as a default. So for example, if I always want it to remove the scroll bar, and I always wanted to clean up the status bar and put the 941. And so once you set the default, it just does it automatically. So that although this app is more sophisticated and thus is a little bit more complicated, once you find your defaults, you can use it very quickly because you just select your
Yeah.
pictures, you have
Yeah.
it stitch it automatically, your defaults are already done, you save it, and you're done. And so it's a quick way to do it. Now, as a lawyer,
That's
I'm
great.
intrigued by this because sometimes screenshots have evidence. You want to show a long screen of messages and like a
Exactly.
divorce case or something like that. And so
Yeah.
this makes something that is it's exhibit ready. It's very nice. But there may be other times too that you want to share screenshots with just a friend, and maybe it doesn't all fit on one screen, so you want it to go in a second screen. And this app just makes it all so simple and so easy. And it's the app itself, you can download it for free. And if you pay $2, you unlock
Yeah.
all the features. And to tell you the truth,
Will do.
probably only need to pay $1 because that second dollar unlocks a feature that I haven't even used yet, where instead of taking different screenshots, you turn on the video recording feature of the iPhone, and then you manually scroll, and it takes the video as you're doing it, and then it converts that video into it. I've actually found it's just as easy to use the screenshots. But I just went ahead, I splurged and spent the $2 instead of the $1 just to unlock all the features of the app. It's a really impressive app, and the next time that I need to work with screenshots, I'm absolutely going to use this one. So again, I don't know, there may be some people that don't use screenshots a lot, but if this is ever a part of your life, and again, it's not just for long screenshots. If you just want to put together a collage of different pictures, this app helps you do that. You can either have a border or not have a border between the pictures. You can have a border around them or not. So even if you're just preparing pictures to post like a little collage on Facebook or Instagram or something like that, this can help you do that too. So it's a nice way to work with photos on your iPhone. And it works on the iPad too. So, I cannot recommend this more. Really, really nice.
I am so happy you did this. I did a video on my Apps and Law blog about Stitch It, and it's great. And like you said, it's great to have that. But I have to. It's been an extremely popular video. Lots of people watching that just simply because I think people are looking for ways, not just the text messages or from a legal perspective, but I love this. Like you said, you can even do. Most of the time I think of stitching in a vertical aspect, right? A series of comments or so. But here, this one little screenshot here is talking about a horizontal stitching. So if you have pictures and you can crop the picture, anyway, just brilliant stuff. Oh yeah, already downloaded it. I'll be using it, and I'll probably have to do a video on this too. But it's great that we have some of these options. And for $2, it's great. Like that's well worth it. And I even told folks on that last video, Jeff, that again, from our perspective, I was using it from the idea of like text, capturing text messages, conversations today are one of the primary ways that we capture communications and evidence in cases, both civil cases and criminal cases. But you mentioned it already. For things like you want to capture like a Twitter thread, or you want to capture like a Facebook comment, all the comments from from Facebook, for example, on your phone. Yeah. Things like that you just might want to preserve, and there's no way because those things are dynamic, they change all the time. And for your own personal backups, you just might want to capture some of these things, and having these apps to me it's sort of a good backup, like to know that it's there. Good stuff.
I'll give you an example of that. This is unfortunately a little bit morbid, although bittersweet. I remember after my mom had passed away, a number of people posted things on Facebook of nice little, and I went and I captured those images because at some point, once it's on Facebook, it's hard to find stuff from long ago. But just to sort of have that preserved, every once in a while, just to look back at some of those comments. And so there may be different times in your life that you want to preserve things on your iPhone screen, and this is a great app for helping you to do that.
Thank you, my friend. As always, good recommendation. That is Picsew. I like what they did there. SEW, Picsew. So, okay, I got it. That's good stuff. All right. Thanks for joining again this week, Jeff, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.